listening to the Legal Insight podcast by HHQ, where we help you unpack the world of law, business, tech, and more. And you're listening to episode 17 in season 2 of our podcast. Now we're continuing our deep dive into the ever-evolving landscape of data protection, picking up where we left off after discussing the PDP Amendment Act 2024. This year has been a whirlwind of legal developments, from the Cybersecurity Act 2024 to the Data Sharing Act 2025, not to mention new guidelines and circulars on data protection officers, appointment, and data breach notifications. Now, at HHQ, we've seen an increase in inquiries about these new requirements, especially since the public is now aware that the Technology Practice Group offers both DPO outsourcing services and data breach notification services. Now, to tackle this head-on, we're dedicating 2 episodes to these critical areas. Today, we're focusing on the appointment of a DPO in Malaysia. Now, to guide us through this important topic today, I'm thrilled to have with us Ong Johnson, the head of Technology Practice Group, and Khai, the co-head of Technology Practice Group. Now, welcome to the show, gentlemen.
So good to see you again.
Yes.
Thanks for having us, Zach.
Yes, great to have you both. Now, let's jump right into some of the most common questions we've been getting at HHQ about DPO appointments, aiming to give companies a clearer understanding about their obligations, all right? Now, Khai, let's start with you. In a layman's term, who have not heard of the term DPO or Data Protection Officer, what exactly is a DPO and why is this role important?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So essentially, a data protection officer, as its name suggests, it's a person within an organization or an external service provider, right, that primarily helps a company or an organization with regards to their data protection affairs, right? So it includes data protection strategy and data protection compliance. So that role essentially assists to advise the company on whether their data processing activity is in compliance with the law or not. And also, if it's not in compliance with the law, how can they improve? And the data protection officer also sort of acts like a gatekeeper in a sense. They are the main liaison officer between the organization that the data protection officer represents with our regulators, data protection, Personal Data Protection Commissioner, and also data subjects. Now, Zach, you also asked in your second question, why is this role now important, right? This is exactly because we are in the digital age where data is the new oil.
Yep.
Many companies today, they are processing a lot of personal data of data subjects, right? And also because of the increased awareness by the data subjects in terms of their rights, their privacy rights, their data privacy, when their personal data can be processed and when they can ask the data controller to stop the processing or to amend the way that their personal data is being processed. So essentially, because of all these changes in the awareness in terms of personal rights to data subjects, it makes the role of a data protection officer ever more relevant, right? And they are there with an organization essentially to help them to iron out all these issues when it comes to processing of personal data and also dealing with data subjects and also regulators.
Now, Johnson, there's a common saying that every data controller needs to appoint a DPO. I mean, Khai mentioned data is the new oil and everyone has access to it. So is that actually true that under the new PDP Amendment Act 2024? And what are the specifics requirement that trigger the need for DPO appointment? Is it only big companies, large MNCs that needs to appoint a DPO, or is it universal?
Yes, Zach. So thanks for the question. I think that this is one of the most important aspects for us to clarify. So while this is the aspiration for all companies, for all organizations to actually appoint a DPO. But thankfully, according to a latest guideline and circular that had just been released, only certain companies that meet certain legal requirements are mandatory to appoint DPO. So in order for company to assess whether they would need to appoint a DPO, they can make an internal assessment to see if they meet one of these three requirements. So number one requirement is if the company they actually processes personal data exceeding 20,000 data subjects. Number two requirement is if the company processes sensitive personal data exceeding 10,000 data subjects. And last requirement if the company involves activities that require regular and systematic monitoring of personal data. So I think it's important for us to understand for company to determine whether they need to appoint a personal data officer. Eventually it boils down to the requirement. So I would say that all companies, what they can do right now as they are listening to this podcast is to immediately make an internal assessment to determine whether they actually meet this criteria. But from our assessment, to be honest, 20,000 data subjects, which is a very, very low threshold. So I would suppose most of the company, most likely they will meet this requirement and chances are they would require to engage or to hire a DPO.
Yep.
Now, Khai, what's your take on these requirements? Do you agree with Johnson that the threshold is actually extremely low? Because 20,000 data subjects, I mean, I know of some small social media agencies that handles way more than that, like 5-6 times of those numbers. So do you agree with Johnson on
I'm
that?
very sure this podcast where we are recording, they have more than 20,000 data subjects as well.
Exactly.
So I think definitely I do agree that the number or rather the threshold is low, right? But of course, personally, if you ask me, I think it is low for a reason. It's intentional. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, a lot of the companies that we have spoken to, they just outright say that, hey, why should we be appointing a data protection officer when our company is only so small, right? So, but I think the misconception here is that you shouldn't be judging whether or not you need a data protection based on the size of your company. Again, the role is to deal with data subjects. So of course, I think we need to assess it from the perspective of how many data subjects, what is the scale of the data processing activity that you are carrying out, right? So that number, in my view, while it's low, I think it is appropriate. So, I mean, we just imagine it this way. Even if it's just a small retail company or just a small F&B chain or F&B company, but they provide loyalty program, right? To sign up for a loyalty program, they need to collect personal data of their customers.
Right.
And if they are, the size of the company or the size of the business may be small, but if they have a lot of customers, naturally their database would be huge.
Yeah.
So again, if their database is huge, they will have a lot of personal data in their hand, and they need to be responsible. They need to be held accountable for their processing of those personal data. And hence why I say the threshold is low, but it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Now, Johnson, perhaps the most crucial question on everyone's mind right now, does the DPO have to be an in-house employee? Or can the role be outsourced to a law firm or a specialized department like yours at HHQ? And maybe you can just run us through what are the pros and cons of each approach, if applicable.
Yes, Zach. So thankfully, the law actually allowed company with this flexibility in order for them to either appoint a DPO internally from the existing employee, or otherwise they have this option to actually outsource the DPO offering, the DPO services to another company, external company, such as a law firm. So according to the guideline and the circular, if the company choose to actually outsource these DPO services by way of contract to an external organization, the requirement or the recommendation is for the service to be at least 2 years to ensure stability. So back to the second question that you asked, should a company actually appoint the DPO internally or should they actually outsource these services? I would say it boils down to a commercial decision based on two main factors. Number one is cost. Number two is the expertise required for them to meet this requirement. Put it that way, as mentioned by Khai and you earlier, in order for a company to have a DPO, it's going to take cost. And most importantly, most of the companies in Malaysia may actually meet the requirement to appoint a DPO. But lucky or not, most companies in Malaysia, they may not have a huge in-house team. Even if they have a huge in-house team, chances are they may not have a dedicated lawyer that specializes in privacy law, in PDP, or have a good understanding of GDPR. Because privacy law is a very niche and specialized legal area. So whether the company should actually internally appoint a DPO from the existing employee, or should they actually outsource the role of DPO to a law firm like ours. It boils down to the cost consideration and expertise consideration, whether they have the resources and the budget to actually incur, to actually hire additional headcount to fill up this role. Or otherwise, another way for them to meet these requirements is for them to just to outsource to a law firm to meet this requirement, and this can lower the cost as well.
Now, my question would be, is it actually required to outsource to a law firm or even like hire a new person dedicated to be a DPO? Because can't you just appoint somebody within your company, like a secretary or the IT department, just be my DPO for this next 1 or 2 years, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Maybe this question will be to Khai, are there minimum skill requirements, or can anyone just do it?
Yes. Technically, you can appoint anybody, but
Yeah.
of course, that person needs to be of a certain standard, right? So the guideline actually sets out 5 key criteria that DPO should possess, right? Number 1 is, of course, familiarity, or rather well-versed with personal data protection law. So that is a given. Otherwise, how is the person supposed to advise the company on compliance matter, right? So number 2 is the data protection officer needs to be familiar with the company's business model and how the company is processing, basically the company's data processing activities. So again, this can be brought up to speed with anybody, just anybody. Number 3 is the person needs to have a sound understanding of IT and also data security. So that's a little bit more technical. The person needs to know about computer, needs to have some basic understanding about system, about IT system, IT environment, and also simple IT security measures, right? Number 4, the person must be, if I can summarize it very, very simply, the person needs to be professional, right? The person needs to have integrity, needs to be ethical. And last but not least, the person need to be able to promote good and strong data protection, data processing culture within the organizations. Now, of course, I think out of the 5 criteria that I've just mentioned, some of them can be cultivated, and some of them can be sort of trained, in a sense, can be instilled, like understanding of the company's business, right? Any data protection officer that is newly appointed will have to familiarize himself with the company's business model and data processing activity. But there are some that, in a sense, I would say that they are inherent, say familiarity and understanding with the law, and also familiarity with IT, and also data security, right? So those things, it's very difficult for you to find just one single person that possess all these 5 criteria. And hence why, really, if you ask me, it is much simpler for a company to just outsource to an external organizations. The external organizations, they will have, in a sense, a team, right, that is set up to provide all these services.
And I can imagine if you can even find one person who possesses like all 5 infinity stones, he's going to cost a lot.
He's going to be Tony Stark.
Yeah. You're gonna...
And then he's going to be expensive.
Yes. Now, Johnson, going deeper, right? Besides the minimum qualifications and skills, are there other factors, roles, responsibilities that should be considered when determining whether the DPO should be internal or outsourced?
So I think that one of the key things that we want to emphasize is that the appointment of DPO is more than just a paper title designation. In other words, the DPO that's being appointed, the DPO title itself, it carries real responsibility. There is actually specific tasks that should be carried out by the DPO. So, for example, the moment, let's say, Zach, you have been appointed as a DPO, you have to carry out certain tasks. For example, you would need to actually, first of all, carry out a gap analysis in order to identify whether there's any gaps within the current procedures, the current protocols, or the current system in the organization. And then following that, you will need to conduct, they call it a framework development. This means you are supposed to actually develop, to revise, or to amend, or to refine, or even to improve the current policy, the current PDP notice, security policy, security guideline. And last but not least, you need to provide training, because what's the use of actually having the guideline but no one understand it? So in other words, you will need to have the ability to actually conduct training, competence training for the board of directors, for the stakeholders, for the whole organization, from a top-down approach. And I would say that the most important role of a DPO is in the event of a data breach. Because in the event of data breach, the role of DPO, I would say that will shine the most, because the DPO will be the contact person. The DPO will be the key person to be in touch with either the PDP commissioner or otherwise with the data subjects. So the DPO should have a actual experience, or I would say that should have actual knowledge in order for them to actually understand what is a crisis, what is a data breach crisis, and when it happens, what are they supposed to do, how are they supposed to actually conduct incident response, incident management, how are they supposed to actually manage the PR, how are they supposed to actually liaise with the cybersecurity company or even cyber insurance. So DPO is more than just a title. It carries real responsibility. So as mentioned by Khai, these are real roles that must be well selected, must be well satisfied by any DPO. So in order for any company to decide, should they internally appoint someone or to outsource to anyone, or if they're going to outsource to anyone, who are they supposed to outsource to? The key criteria is to understand whether that dedicated team, that dedicated individual, whether they have the fine-tune, as I mentioned, whether they actually have the required resources or the required experience to meet these responsibilities.
Thanks, Johnson. I like how you say when data breach occurs and not if data breach occurs.
Yes, correct. It's never if, because like it or not, at this time and age, data breach will happen. But when it happens, is your organization ready? Is your DPO ready to stand up and to face these challenges?
No, that's right. Khai, let's say a company is required to appoint a DPO, right? No question about it. But the company just choose not to. Like, I'm not going to appoint a DPO. I don't think I need a DPO. What are the potential consequences that they could face by not appointing one?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, it is a legal requirement for a company, should the company meet the minimum threshold to appoint a data protection officer, right? So essentially, if you choose not to, you are going directly against the wording of the law. And so that is, in a sense, you are breaching a law, right? While this can result in legal penalty, I think most importantly, it will also cause reputational damage. If you are a brand or a company that really relies a lot on your customers to keep coming back to you, and hence why you have a whole host of database of personal data of data subjects, right? Reputational damage can be dire, can be costly, and can even be fatal to the business as a whole. If you really don't have a data protection officer, like I said just now, data protection officer is the gatekeeper. He is the main liaison with the data protection commission and also the data subjects, right? If data subjects, in the event of, say, leakage, personal data incident, who are they supposed to contact? Yeah. So all these things will be an issue. And at the end of the day, it really shines a bad light on the company. So I think really, really costly is the reputational damage that it can bring in terms of the optic and also the branding of the company as a whole.
Yep. And in the next episode, we're going to actually dive really deep into data breach notification,
exactly.
which is a whole another ball game.
Yes.
Yep. So now, Johnson, any final thoughts? What's your advice to companies just trying to wrap their head around DPO appointments? Can companies just take a wait and see approach, just see what the big guys are doing, and then, we'll just roll it out in phases? What is your advice?
I don't think that they have this liberty of actually taking a wait and see approach. The reason is because the enforcement date is coming out really, really soon, which is happening in a couple months' time, 1st June. So I would say that the moment the circular and the guideline has been released, actually a lot of clients of ours, they actually came to us because first of all, they want to identify, they want to ascertain whether those companies would meet the requirement for them to appoint a DPO. So I would say that before the company decides should they even appoint a DPO, they should first make an internal assessment to identify would they actually meet these requirements. And if you are listening to the podcast and then you have certain doubt whether you would need a DPO, reach out to us because we will be very happy to schedule a session to provide a free consultation to advise whether your organization will require a DPO. As mentioned by you earlier, our department, we are very familiar with data breach and also with privacy law. So in the event you would actually want to explore these DPO outsourcing services, we have a range of services that we believe can be catered and tailored for all organizations. So just give us a call and then we are happy to have a discussion further.
Now, we understand that at the time of recording of this podcast, many companies are already reaching out to our technology practice group to understand further on the appointment of a DPO and data breach notification. Now, our technology practice group have actual experience, which is rare right now in Malaysia because given how new the law actually is, our team has actually assisted many companies in their data breach notifications and also have actual cybersecurity experience as well. So, as you heard from Johnson, do schedule a consultation call. It is free. It is for you to actually assess whether you need to appoint a DPO and more information to follow. So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be diving deep into the complexities of data breach notification. This is Zach, and I'm signing off for the Legal Insight podcast by HHQ.